Do Jehovah's Witnesses shun people who used to belong to the religion? According to their frequently asked questions page, no, they don't. But is that true? And is the act of shunning morally, lovingly, or even scripturally correct? Let's get into it. First, let's read the frequently asked questions entry under Do Jehovah's Witnesses Shun Those Who Used to Belong to the Religion? It's not very long. Let's go through it. Those who are baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses but no longer preach to others, perhaps even drifting away from association with fellow believers, are not shunned. In fact, we reach out to them and try to rekindle their spiritual interest. We do not automatically disfellowship someone who commits a serious sin. If, however, a baptized witness makes a practice of breaking the Bible's moral code and does not repent, he or she will be shunned or disfellowshipped. The Bible clearly states, "Remove the wicked man from among yourselves." What of a man who is disfellowshipped but whose wife and children are still Jehovah's Witnesses? The religious ties he had with his family change, but blood ties remain. The marriage relationship and normal family affections and dealings continue. Disfellowshipped individuals may attend our religious services. If they wish, they may also receive spiritual counsel from congregation elders. The goal is to help each individual once more to qualify to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Disfellowship people who reject improper conduct and demonstrate a sincere desire to live by the Bible's standards are always welcome to become Jehovah's Witnesses again. First, we're going to go through each part of this and show how it's just nonsense. And second of all, we're going to look at the scripture that they cite to find out whether or not that's even what Paul is saying. And even if that was, if we have to take what Paul says as a rule based on the Watchtower's own claims about who gets to write the rules. So let's start off by going piece by piece through this frequently asked question. All right, those who are baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses but no longer preach to others, perhaps even drifting away from association with fellow believers, are not shunned. In fact, we reach out to them to try to kindle their spiritual interest. You're going to see as I go along that the Watchtower uses a lot of deception in the things that they say here. And it's interesting because there's a scripture, Psalms 26:4, that says, "I do not associate with deceitful men, and I avoid those who hide what they are." And that's coming out of my father's old New World Translation, his silver sword. So that's straight out of the Bible that Jehovah's Witnesses use, that you do not associate with people who are deceitful and hide what they are. Now, here the Watchtower is being deceitful because they say, hey, if people leave, we don't shun them, which is only true if they fade. Now, if they actually write to the Watchtower and say, I no longer want to be Jehovah's Witnesses, or if they tell the elders, I'm no longer going to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or if they go to another church, or if they just disagree openly with the governing body on some point, they will be labeled apostates and they will be kicked out and shunned. They will be shunned if they leave. And this comes out of the Shepherd the Flock of God book, which is the Elders Rule Book. It is 290 pages and has 70,000 words of rules for elders to enforce on Jehovah's Witnesses. And these rules are all written by the governing body. Under the list of disfellowshipping offenses, there is apostasy. According to the rule book, apostasy is a standing away from true worship, a falling away, defection, rebellion, abandonment. It includes the following. 1. Celebrating false religious holidays. 2. Participation in interfaith activities, which includes what it calls sharing in false religious songs and prayers. And 3. Deliberately spreading teachings contrary to Bible truth. Now let's break this down. What they're saying is, if you go to another church, you are engaging in false religious practice because in the world of Jehovah's Witnesses, only Jehovah's Witnesses are true Christians. Everyone else is part of Babylon the Great. All other churches are from the devil. So if you go to any other church because you no longer believe that the witnesses are correct, you're an apostate, you will be kicked out and shunned. If you choose to celebrate any false religious holidays, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's Christmas or Easter or anything that is traditionally accepted as a Christian holiday, you will be kicked out and shunned. So can you really just leave and not be shunned? No, you're going to be shunned if you leave unless you quietly leave and don't tell anybody about your newfound faith if you have that. And it also says deliberately spreading teachings contrary to Bible truth. Well, in the world of Jehovah's Witnesses, who defines Bible truth? The governing body. They say they are the faithful and discreet slave. They say they are God's only channel for dispensing spiritual food in the world today. So if you disagree with the governing body, you're disagreeing with Bible truth. Now, that truth changes frequently as they constantly update their belief system. But if you break their rules or disagree with their interpretation, even though they say themselves that they are neither inspired nor infallible, you are an apostate. You will be kicked out and shunned. So is it true when they say that we do not shun people who leave the religion? That is not true. And you have to read their specific wording. People who are baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses but no longer preach to others, perhaps even drifting away from association with fellow believers, are not shunned. But if you leave formally, which is called disassociating, if you tell the elders, I no longer agree with the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm going to this other church, or just starting your own, or just reading the Bible on your own, or anything like that, or if you just openly disagree with the governing body and say as much in the congregation, you will be shunned. So they're being deceitful when they say that people who leave aren't shunned. Because yeah, most of them are. Unless you slink away and hide, you will be shunned. Then it says, we do not automatically disfellowship someone who commits a serious sin. If, however, a baptized witness makes a practice of breaking the Bible's moral code and does not repent, he or she will be shunned or disfellowshipped. The Bible clearly states, remove the wicked man from among yourselves. Yes, it does say that in 1 Corinthians 5:13, but we're going to go through what it says around that so you can see that actually isn't what it means, even if we should be taking Paul's words as law to begin with. What of a man who is disfellowshipped but whose wife and children are still Jehovah's Witnesses? The religious ties he had with his family change, but his blood ties remain. The marriage relationship and normal family affections and dealings continue. Again, these are what I like to call now weasel words. Wonderful post on Reddit where someone referred to it as that. These are weasel words. They are being deceitful. It is true that if a man is a husband and a father and he lives with his family and he's disfellowshipped, that they still have a normal, relatively normal interaction with their parent. However, if your child who no longer lives at home is disfellowshipped, you are absolutely supposed to shun them. It says here in Watchtower, October of 2017, the truth brings not peace but a sword. Quote, despite our pain of heart, we must avoid normal contact with a disfellowshipped family member by telephone, text messages, letters, emails, or social media. What happened to the attorney for Watchtower that went in front of the Canadian Supreme Court and said,
the nature of the relationship then of a disfellowshipped person is not completely shunned. Normal family relations continue with the exception of spiritual fellowship.
Normal family relations continue, but it just said in the Watchtower, we must avoid normal contact with a disfellowshipped family member. So that was a lie, and it's part of their weasel words. So what they will say is, oh, if he still lives at home, normal family relations continue. But that's not even really true, is it? Because if someone is completely indoctrinated, let's say the wife and child are completely indoctrinated and absolutely believe that anyone who is not one of Jehovah's Witnesses when Armageddon comes, who does not join the religion at the last minute, which apparently they can now do, is going to die at Armageddon. They believe dear old dad is going to die at Armageddon. They also believe, if they're fully indoctrinated, that the governing body is the only authority from God on earth, and they believe that anyone who defies them is an apostate. An apostate is the worst kind of label you can apply to anyone if you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So now dad is an apostate if he disagrees with the Watchtower, and that's why he's disfellowshipped. He's an apostate who's going to die at Armageddon. And you were told to view apostates and people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses in the worst kind of light. They are judged. They will be destroyed by God. So under that belief system, Would normal affections continue? I actually know a former brother who was also a former elder who woke up from the religion, and his family treated him so poorly after he woke up that he finally had to get divorced and leave. He didn't want to. It pained him greatly, but he was being treated with the worst kind of disrespect because he was no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses and disagreed with their doctrines, philosophies, teachings, their covering up of crime, and everything else that they have done. And his former wife and children were so indoctrinated that they treated him terribly. And so he ultimately had to make the decision to leave. Does that sound like normal family relations continuing to you? Does that sound like normal family affections and dealings continuing to you? Obviously not. These are weasel words. This is a deception. This is a lie that they're telling to the public to try to make them sound better than they really are. And again, what does Psalms 26:4 say? I do not associate with deceitful men, and I avoid those who hide what they are. As an example, Watchtower has very often quoted the passage in Acts where the apostles are standing before the Sanhedrin and they are told to stop preaching. Now, do the apostles use weasel words to try to, kind of sound like maybe they're going to stop and then go out and continue preaching anyway? What do they say? We must obey God as ruler rather than men. They just outright refuse because they believe that they have the truth from Jesus Christ and they're going to talk about it. So if Watchtower is so convinced, and if Jehovah's Witnesses are so convinced that they are right and that they have God's favor and blessing in the truth, which is what they call it, they call the religion the truth, why are they afraid to just state the truth that we just read from the Watchtower 2017, October? We must avoid normal contact with a disfellowshipped family member. Why don't they just say it? Because they're not God's chosen people. They're not the truth. They're trying to protect themselves. They do not have the boldness of the apostles in Acts that they tell Jehovah's Witnesses they should have when they're in the ministry. They're hiding who they are. They're using weasel words. They're cowards. Let's just put it that way. In fact, the whole disfellowshipping process is also cowardly. They're trying to remove dissent rather than being willing to listen to dissent. It's cowardly. You may remember the video that Watchtower produced that showed a mother refusing to answer the phone when her disfellowshipped daughter calls her. I remember it.
They loved me and wanted me to come back to Jehovah. I tried to contact them. I just wanted to talk and to hear their voice. I missed being with my family. And they thought about reaching out to me. But they knew that if they had associated with me, even a little, just to check on me, that small dose of association might have satisfied me.
Does that look like normal family affection to you? Of course not. That's a lie. This is deceptive. It's weasel words. Then it says, disfellowshipped individuals may attend our religious services. If they wish, they may also receive spiritual counsel from congregation elders. The goal is to help each individual once more to qualify to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Disfellowshipped people who reject improper conduct and demonstrate a sincere desire to live by the Bible standards are always welcome to become Jehovah's Witnesses again. True, but deceptive. Because yes, someone who's disfellowshipped can attend the meetings of Jehovah's Witnesses, but nobody can talk to them. You can't go up to them. You can't shake their hand. You can't ask them how they're doing. You can't even ask about how they're doing in terms of their return to Jehovah, which is really returning to the Watchtower. You can't ask about spiritual progress. You can't talk about anything with them. You have to pretend they're not there. You act as if they don't exist. But it doesn't say that here. Oh, no, it's fine. They can come to the Kingdom Hall. They'll be welcome there. No, not really. If you went to a friend's house or someone you thought was your friend, and they let you in the door, but they didn't acknowledge your presence other than that. They didn't look at you. They didn't give you any food. They didn't offer you a glass of water. They didn't say 2 words to you, and you just sat there while they talked to other people that were also invited. Would you think that you're welcome back to your friend's house? No, of course not. That's a very crappy way to treat somebody. And that's what will happen if you are disfellowshipped as one of Jehovah's Witnesses and go back to the Kingdom Hall. This frequently asked question also says nothing about the kangaroo court that you have to go through in order to be disfellowshipped. They act as if someone sins seriously, repeatedly, oh, well, they're just gone now. No, they go through a kangaroo court that involves 3 elders. No witnesses or observers are allowed. You can't bring people to be your defense witnesses to speak in your behalf. Nope, can't have that. None of that. You can't record the proceedings. Nope, can't do that. None of that. Why are they afraid of you bringing other people to stand up for you? And why are they afraid of you recording what they say and do during the meeting? All of that is in the Shepherd the Flock of God book, where it very clearly states you cannot bring other people and you cannot record the proceedings. Now, in a normal court of law, at least relatively just court of law, the proceedings are recorded. There's usually a stenographer who's typing it all out, and public notes are made available so that anyone can see what happened in the court. People are also welcome to sit in and watch the proceeding, except under a few restricted circumstances where a jury is sequestered. But it's never just the judge and the person, and no recording and no other witnesses, because that is the worst possible way for justice to prevail in a court of law. You need transparency, proof that you're not up to something, proof that it's not a kangaroo court, that it's not rubber stamping some decision. But that's exactly what the elders of Jehovah's Witnesses do. They rubber stamp a decision. You don't really get to speak for yourself at all, in my experience, and in the experience of other people who have spoken to me about their kangaroo court experiences in judicial committees with Jehovah's Witnesses. It's already decided in advance. You're guilty until proven more guilty, as Beth so eloquently put it in our video together. Now, let's say that you just refuse to show up. No, I don't acknowledge your authority. There's nothing in the Bible that says you have the authority to do this. I don't even believe in your religion anymore. I'm going to another church now. So I'm not even going to show up to your kangaroo court, where I can't bring my own defense witnesses and I can't record it to let everybody else know how you're going to behave in this kangaroo court. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to invite you a second time to come back, and when you just don't do it, you just refuse to go, they're going to disfellowship you anyway. And you're still going to be shunned by any friends and family you have in the religion. Does any of that sound like a just, Christ-like, loving arrangement? Obviously not. Obviously not. And none of that is in the frequently asked questions, of course, because they don't want you to know, as a member of the public, just how horrific what they do as a religion is. So are they telling the truth in this frequently asked questions? It's half-truths, but it's not the whole truth. They are being deceitful. They are hiding who they really are. They are not giving you all the information, and they're trying to make themselves look better than they are. All right, now onto the question about whether or not disfellowshipping and shunning is actually scriptural. Now, the first thing I want to say about this is they pull this, I'm going to flip over to it in the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 5. That's where they get it from. There's one verse where they get it from. It says, remove the wicked person from among yourselves. Now, we're going to go through what was happening when Paul said that. But even so, let's say that you totally agreed that this is what Paul meant, that you should completely shun people who don't listen to the governing body, people who go to another church, people who decide they don't want to be in your religion anymore. And granted, as in this particular circumstance, people who are immoral in some way, repeatedly, without repentance. Let's say that you were totally in agreement with that as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Who does the Watchtower says is the only source of any kind of doctrinal decision? The governing body. They call themselves the faithful slave. They say they are God's channel. Only they can write doctrine. Only they get new light. Nobody else. Not you, not an elder, not a circuit overseer, nobody else. Only the governing body. Was Paul a member of what they call the first century governing body? No, he wasn't. In fact, he had to bring, in Acts chapter 15, a decision to the governing body in order to have them decide whether or not new Christians who were not Jews needed to get circumcised. Paul didn't make that decision. He brought it to what the Watchtower calls the governing body of the first century. And interestingly, this is the only place that you ever see this supposed governing body making a decision on something. And they take that to mean, look, only the governing body has the right to do that. And of course, that's us. They're self-proclaimed, but yeah, that's us now. Was Paul a member of the governing body? No, he wasn't. So does Paul have the right to dictate doctrine? Well, no, he wouldn't, because he's not a member of the governing body. And a couple of times in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, same book we're about to read from, Paul says, this is my opinion. I say this, not the Lord. So you could take that to mean, from the perspective of Jehovah's Witnesses in the Watchtower, Paul's giving suggestions as to how things should be handled. But let's say that you do absolutely believe that what Paul says is absolute law. Let's get into what he actually says. First of all, what happened here? In 1 Corinthians chapter 5, it says, actually sexual immorality is reported among you, and such immorality as is not even found among the nations, of a man living with his father's wife. So this is a situation where Paul is saying something immoral is happening. Now, it's interesting to me that although Paul says that the law code has been nailed to the cross, or the torture stake, in Colossians 2:14, he now references a situation that under the law is considered immoral. Leviticus 18:8, you must not have sexual relations with your father's wife. It is exposing your father to shame. Now, note also that Paul refers to the father's wife, not his mother. So we're left to guess about whether or not we're dealing with the stepmother here or his actual mother. Either way, I admit that's pretty creepy and I'm not in favor of that. But it's just interesting to me that Paul is referencing a Mosaic law code commandment. But Paul also says that the law has been nailed to the cross. Interesting. Interested to know what you think about that in the comments. Now, let's go on. So this is specifically about an act of sexual immorality. And it says, and are you proud of it? Should you not rather mourn so that the man who committed this deed should be taken away from your midst? So he says that they are going along with it. They're not doing anything about it, and he's censuring them for this. But now let's get down to the part that Watchtower quotes. Watchtower quotes verse 13, but let's start at 9 and let's see what Paul actually says. It says, in my letter, I wrote you to stop keeping company with sexually immoral people, not meaning entirely with the sexually immoral people of this world, or the greedy people, or extortioners, or idolaters. Otherwise, you would actually have to get out of the world. But now I'm writing you to stop keeping company with anyone called a brother who is sexually immoral, or a greedy person, or an idolater, or a reviler, or a drunkard, or an extortioner, not even eating with such a man. For what do I have to do with judging those outside? Do you not judge those inside, while God judges those outside? Remove the wicked person from among yourselves. So Paul is referring to one specific act of immorality. Does he say anything about apostasy? Does he say anything about not listening to the governing body and what they interpret as Bible truth? Does he say anything about just no longer wanting to be a Christian and leaving? No, he's specifically talking about an act of what he calls, or what he would call, or what Watchtower would call, gross sexual immorality. He thought that was creepy and disgusting and they shouldn't do it, so they should get rid of him. But notice what it says. I am writing you to stop keeping company with anyone called a brother who is sexually immoral, or greedy, or an idolater, or a reviler, or a drunkard, or an extortioner. But what if someone just wants to leave and no longer wants to be referred to as a brother or a sister in the congregation? What if they just join a different church? They no longer agree with this particular form of Christianity, and so they're moving to a different one. He doesn't say anything about that, does he? In fact, he says, not meaning entirely with the sexually immoral people of this world, or the greedy people, or extortioners, or idolaters. Otherwise, you would actually have to get out of the world. So he's being very clear. I'm not saying everybody out there who does this stuff. I'm just talking about people in your congregation, that you should remove the wicked person from among yourselves, which makes sense if someone is in the congregation and is claiming to be a brother while doing things that are clearly against the moral code of that group, it makes sense that they wouldn't be okay with that. But what if they left? Paul says God judges those outside. So the Watchtower gets this entirely wrong. They say that you should judge and shun anyone who does this huge list of things, and it's a long list, that they have determined warrants disfellowshipping and shunning. But Paul says a few very specific things, and he says only people who are in the congregation, that God should judge those outside. He doesn't say anything about shunning people who choose to change religions. It's obvious when you really read the passage that Paul's words are much more nuanced than what the Watchtower says. And the Watchtower has come up with their own huge list of things that they think means you should be kicked out and shunned for, that Paul does not include in this passage. And again, Paul was not a governing body member, and so he's not writing doctrine anyway. And according to Paul's own words in 1 Corinthians 7, at least that passage says, well, this is just my opinion. I think I have God's Spirit, but this is my opinion. So shouldn't Jehovah's Witnesses, by their own doctrinal position, not be viewing Paul, a non-governing body member, as writing doctrine? And shouldn't they be reading his words for what they actually say, rather than what the Watchtower claims they mean? So do Jehovah's Witnesses shun people who choose to leave the religion? Absolutely. Under many, many circumstances, yes, they do. The only time they don't is if you pretend to claim you're still one and just slink away quietly, which they call fading. If you actually formally leave, or even just tell the elders, I don't believe this anymore, I'm leaving, you're going to be kicked out and shunned. They use kangaroo courts in order to make this decision, where you are not allowed to bring in other witnesses and where you are not allowed to record the proceedings. There's no transparency involved here. This is not a just system, and it certainly doesn't reflect the kind of judicial system that was used in Israel, where these cases were held at the gates by a group of older men in full view of the public for transparency purposes. Under Jewish law, what Watchtower does in their kangaroo courts is actually illegal. And the Watchtower itself says that it's illegal, the way Jesus was treated in a very similar kangaroo court that was not transparent, was not open to the public, and was not held in the city gates. So Watchtower has no position for what I call the hate crime of shunning people just because they choose to leave, have a difference of opinion, no longer want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or let's say they do want to live a lifestyle that is contrary to what Paul says is correct, but they leave the religion. They're not calling themselves a brother or sister anymore. They just choose to leave. Wouldn't you think that it would be better to try to reach out to people if you think that they're wrong, to show them love, to try to reason with them, to try to help them back? Shunning doesn't convince anyone they're wrong. Watchtower says that shunning is love, that if you shun your family, you love your family. But that's absolutely not true. Your family isn't coming back because, oh, they love me so much because they shun me. No, they're coming back because they're in pain and want their family back. It's coercion, not love. Watchtower can use all the weasel words they want to try to explain this away, and they can quote scriptures out of context all they want to try to explain this away and to try to justify their position. But they are incorrect. They're incorrect morally, legally, ethically, and scripturally. But that's what I think, and I'd love to know what you think. So please leave your comments below. Be sure to like this video if you liked it, to share it with others, and to subscribe to my channel to get more of my videos. And if you find it in your heart to do so, you can join the channel by clicking the join button below, or the link in the video description if you don't see the join button, to help support my work. Thank you in advance. I love y'all, and thanks for watching.